Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. We got a big week because the Steelers now, 7-0. For the first time, I think they said the first time in franchise history, but then I saw another thing say that it was like the first time since 1970-something, 78 maybe. So I'm not 100% sure on the stats, and I didn't care to look it up because we're pre-recording the show because of election night on Tuesday, so we're recording this Sunday night. So if some of our stuff's a little bit off, that's why. But it's fresh. The game is fresh, so we're going to go ahead and start with that. The defense played out of their minds. The offense pretty much sucked the entire game, and I hated it. I will say,
the offense does.
I will say, Matt, Eric Ebron, great pickup. I loved it. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I loved the move when they signed him because I thought he just was injured all the time in Detroit. And sometimes just winning games suddenly makes some of those minor bumps and bruises, makes you want to play through them.
Well, the big thing with that, he went to Indianapolis too. And so they had issues there with quarterbacking, and that was one of the teams that I wanted to bring up. Look at what Phillip Rivers has been able to do. It's almost ridiculous, and I don't want to say it reflects poorly on Andrew Luck because I know he had like injury concerns and issues his entire career. But Indianapolis Colts, on a roster that was supposedly a rebuild, they've been battling injuries to almost their receiver core, their running backs, and they're 5-2. They're tied for first in the AFC South. So for all the flack Phillip Rivers got about never winning in the playoffs, and I mean, I was one of the ones to call him out because he had, at one point, with LaDainian Tomlinson and Antonio Gates, let's be honest, he should have been winning some playoff series or at least getting them deeper into the playoffs. And now, fresh scenery, let's see what happens. I mean, I would like for him, in terms of that great quarterback group, with I would consider them all like the same era. Him, Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning. It'd be cool to have him win a Super Bowl to join that group if Ben doesn't have a chance to win another one, which it looks like they might. 7-0. I brought the stats last week that said if they get to 12-4, 2 of the last 3 times they've been to the Super Bowl. So a good look at it. The Baltimore game was so big, and defense with holes, linebacker injuries, so big stars are out. And yet they were able to put together stops and everything at the best time. I mean, they started off with the interception returned for a touchdown. And then you go ahead and if I was going to tell you that, hey, I'm looking at the team stats right now, total yards, Steelers only had 221 total yards. You would tell me how they got killed. You can't have 200 yards of offense. Ben Roethlisberger was 21 of 32 for 182 yards and 2 touchdowns. James Conner led the running back with 47 yards. You would laugh and say, oh, that was like a 42-21 game. But the defense was able to shut down Baltimore, and they get the win 28-24. The one key, and this is a big point because I talk about it all the time, and this is my last point on the game, and I'll let you give your thoughts. Pittsburgh was down deep in their own zone. It was 4th down. The Ravens went for it. They tried to run a quarterback draw. He got stuffed. I thought they should have took the points. They had a chance for a field goal. They would have been down 1 point. They also had the timeouts, and this is a point that I think whenever you talk about poor game management and coaches not knowing the clock, they let the 2-minute warning go before they ran that play. Why? That was a dumb move by John Harbaugh because they let the Steelers get set on defense, and then they ran what I considered a stupid play, a quarterback draw. Like, you have Lamar Jackson, he's good at getting out of the pocket. They don't do any quarterback rollouts. If you're going to run him anyway, give him the option of passing. Like, it's 4th and 2. But I thought what should happen was they should have ran the field goal team out. Pittsburgh's offense was so bad, I knew they were going to get the ball back. And then I text you in anger because it was like 3rd and short. And the Steelers ran their stupid bonehead James Conner up the middle. Like he's Jerome Bettis. He's going to plow through that. There was zero chance that play was going to be successful. They would have been better off doing play action pass. I know they wanted to keep the clock running. But at some point, and maybe they just trusted their defense. I don't know. But I thought the Ravens, if they would have took the points, they would have kicked the second field goal, and they would have won the game. And so I'm going to say 100 times, John Harbaugh, just call me up. I don't really like the Ravens. I hate them, actually. But if you're going to pay me, I will be your clock guy. I will tell you, this is dumb. Run the kicky team out there and get it off. So you have the 2-minute warning and your 2 timeouts. You're going to have 2 minutes to go down and get the other field goal because the Steelers aren't going to do anything. They're going to run 3 times or whatever. I don't know if they ran all 3, but they had no chance of getting that first down. Ravens were going to get the ball back no matter what. What are your thoughts on the game?
There was a play that stood out in my mind, and I want to say it was in the third quarter where they were saying about Pittsburgh going with the no huddle, and there was like trips to the field, and there were 2 receivers in the boundary in the short side of the field. And he's like going through this extensive like thing to the short side. They turned around, the top side receiver was like, "What's the call?" And he was just kind of waved him off. And I was like, I thought, wow, he's just blatantly just like, just go stand. I don't care what you do. I'm not throwing it to you anyhow. And after the game, I saw one of the interviews that he gave, and he said, yeah, pretty much when we went shotgun, I was just kind of drawing stuff up in the dirt. And he's like, I know that you don't want to hear that, but that's kind of like just what we were doing. It's like, that's Pittsburgh's offense because they haven't had a really good ground game in a while. So they have to rely on Ben just standing back there and gunslinging to compensate for it. I think instead of having a consistent ground game, what they have is those short screen passes that everyone complained about when Todd Haley was the offensive coordinator.
And I think I talked about that last week because my thing was you can't try to switch that now. Like, it's too late. The last couple of drafts, you've gotten running backs that fit that mold. Like, you were trying to recreate what you had with Le'Veon Bell. And so you don't have any power rushers. So you should never be trying to pound it up the middle on 3rd and 2. Like, run a quick, like, option. Even throw a wildcat in there. Like, I don't care. If you're going to tell them you're going to run the ball, do anything else other than just go power I. I don't even know. They might have been single back. But let's say, like, they're just going to run up the middle. Like, I knew it was coming. I knew it was going to be stopped. Do a quick toss. Try to get to the edge. I know Connor doesn't have the speed for that, though, either. So it's kind of like, all right, what are you really doing here? They would have been better off running double screens, having him go one side, Ebron go the other, and then he just flips it to whichever side he feels he gets the pressure from, and then trying to get it that way. Like, I would have rather have seen that.
Yeah, I think that would have made more sense, but in the heat of the moment, I understand you want that momentum and to try to establish that ground game, give him at least the opportunity to show that he can't get it done. And I was actually more surprised that they were able to come back. Like, when Baltimore took the lead initially, I thought, oh, here we go. This is going to be like the right time where Roethlisberger throws a pick. But, to his credit, he was able to drive them down, take the lead back, and kind of keep Baltimore from really building a lead. And when you look at, they're going to have to play him at least 2 more times. The thing that stood out was containing Lamar Jackson. I thought that, like, you're not going to completely keep him penned up, but I thought they did a good job of minimizing his run game and trying to make him beat them throwing the ball. And I think that's kind of why Baltimore hasn't made a deeper playoff run, because Lamar Jackson has to show that he has more than just the power run game.
And that's my point exactly. This just kind of hammered it home even more to Ravens fans. Can he do enough to win the big game? Like I said, they were just trying to run the ball. I figured that was a call from the huddle when he did his 4th and 2 draw play. But I mean, there were other times down where he tried to take it over. There was that holding call on the earlier one where he ran for the touchdown. Like, that's the kind of dynamic stuff he can do, but he's not consistent with it. And the turnovers, you can't have those against Pittsburgh. I mean, if I'm going to take a negative look at the game, I'll say the time of possession, the Ravens had it for 10, I guess almost 11, maybe 12 minutes more, trying to do some math in my head, than Pittsburgh for the entire game. And that can't happen again. Like, Baltimore's built on, we're going to run the ball, but they get a lot of quick scoring strikes. Pittsburgh has to keep them on the sidelines. I think just in terms of like the total yards, the turnovers, they had 6 more first downs. Like, everything was in Baltimore's corner. If I just gave you the stats, you would say, oh, Baltimore won. The only thing that Steelers really won were the 4 turnovers. The Steelers had their own fumble, but it's 4-1. Like, that's
how much of a factor do you think Judon getting thrown out had on Baltimore's defense?
To be honest, the Steelers' offense didn't do anything really anyway. They had, like you talked about, the one drive to take the lead back. That was really it. I mean, they were down. They got the 2 touchdowns in the third quarter, and then Baltimore took the lead. You would think that it would be over. Then they get the late touchdown. Like I said, you knew their offense wasn't going to do anything down the stretch. So, I mean, going back to the next game, getting him back, I don't think it's going to make a difference because I would already assume that Pittsburgh's not going to be able to recreate their own defensive performance. And so, like, if I was looking at this game and they were going to play again next week, I would say the Steelers would lose. Like, it's very tough to come off a game like this. It's going to be big, but at least they split with them early. And then if they have to face them a third time in the playoffs, anything could go. Like, they always played them tough. Now you have enough offensive stuff. Like last year, that's the difference Ben Roethlisberger makes. Last year, they never would have been able to just throw the playbook out and just go out there and get it done. Like, they wouldn't have never done that. So that's a big key. And like, going back to my Colts thing, like, that's the kind of thing Phillip Rivers can do too. The Colts never had since Peyton Manning. So as a franchise, like, if you're looking at that, and I haven't even been talking about them as one of my teams to watch. I mean, I think I brought them up one other time because of Phillip Rivers. But just overall, in terms of like the AFC picture now, New England continues to lose. I had my stats last week about Bill Belichick without Tom Brady. Even worse now. Cam Newton fumbled. Again, that's on the head coach. How many times is Cam Newton just going to be running the ball? Like, why? I don't understand that. I don't understand. And then I watched, which I don't even know what the actual outcome is because, so the Bears ended up losing, right? Yeah. But like, Nick Foles was down there getting him in field goal range to send it to overtime. And I thought, like, still, why wouldn't Bill Belichick have went after him? It would have been more of a consistent, he's a known winner. Like, why not try to bring that type of veteran in instead of Cam Newton? And then you're like not running the best offense for either of you. I mean, Cam Newton's physically upset. If you watch him on the sideline, like, he just can't handle it. This is probably his last season, right? I mean, I don't know, after all these turnovers, like, it's not giving him a good look. And a lot of people are going to be in Belichick's corner and say, oh, yeah, well, Cam's past his prime. But I just think that you're throwing him into a system that worked a decade ago. Well, I guess it wasn't quite a decade yet, but 8 years ago, 9 years ago. So, I don't know.
He could reunite with Riverboat Ron in Washington. Just still be that power guy for him for the Washington football team.
And maybe that's something where he could go. Because Washington's having their own issues. And let's be honest, if he was a free agent and the Patriots never signed him, I bet they would have picked him up this year anyway. So, Going around the rest of the league, though, the Browns get beat by the Raiders.
Of course. Winning programs just know how to win.
But they're still ahead because they have the extra win right now. And so the playoff picture, you have a lot of relatively new teams with the Bills leading the AFC East. The Titans and Colts tied, like I said. Then you have the Raiders, the Browns, and the Dolphins fighting for that last playoff spot. So it's going to be a strange year. The Dolphins put in Tua, and I don't know if you saw this because I brought it up last week. Like, why would you make that switch? And apparently, they went with the business model approach. So they were looking at it. It leaked out that they were looking at it in terms of they had a bunch of high draft picks from their trades, and they wanted to know if Tua was the real deal, or because they took a flyer on him after his hip injury, or if they should invest in trying to make some moves, potentially go up for Trevor Lawrence or another quarterback, depending on what they could get done.
Now, to me, that's a really stupid idea, because why would you waste a draft pick on Tua if you're even flirting with the idea of Trevor Lawrence might be better?
But when was he drafted? I'm going to look it up. Because, of course, whenever I type it in. So he was like the overall fifth number, like in the first round, he was the overall fifth pick.
Yeah.
So, I didn't realize he was that high. I thought he was late first round for some reason. But potentially, like in their defense, they have other first round picks. And I'm not saying that they were trying to get Trevor Lawrence. They were looking to see if they should get another quarterback, which I would assume if you have that many picks. And to be honest, what if they were just floating him around as potential trade bait? Like, I mean, they would know if he's going to fit their system. What if they say, hey, let's get some tape on this guy and see if any teams are interested? I mean, I don't know. Right now, it looks like what? The Jets? The Jets are in position to land him.
Yeah, Jets have that one pretty much buttoned up.
I think Dabo has said he doesn't expect him back. I saw the report saying that NFL execs have been told to expect him. I don't know if that's coming from his camp, Clemson's camp, like their feeling on it or what. But I would say pretty consistently, like, why would you come back? You're not guaranteed anything. He had coronavirus this week, so he was out. And like I said, they struggle with Boston College. I don't know how good Boston College actually is, but we'll save it for the college talk. I mean, Clemson, it just shows you how big of a drop-off when you have that NFL-type guy. That I think that a lot of teams, they're going to be hoping that the Jets get a win to give them a chance. You have the Jaguars, the Texans. I know some of these teams have quarterbacks, like the Giants. It gives you flexibility like the Dolphins. It's a great approach. You have another young guy. If you need to really move him and try to say, hey, we've seen this guy in practice. We have some film on him. Looks pretty good. Looks all right. I mean, a lot of teams would probably take a chance at Deshaun Watson if they're going to flip Clemson guys for another Clemson guy. You get younger. If you're going to rebuild anyway, why not try to make a move of your quarterback? But I don't know. It's going to be crazy down the stretch to see and make sure, because I know I haven't seen anything about coronavirus cancellations. There's been some pressure from some states about keeping it locked down, but I don't think in terms, I think one of them had said, like, I'm surprised football is still open. I'm like, why? Like, they should move them to a bubble. Again, it's like, why? It's not like you're going to tell people not to go to the grocery store. So, like, these are, like, they're professional athletes, so they're getting paid. They have medical doctors there. I don't know recently if any players have gotten seriously sick from it. But it's going to be a crazy year down the stretch. And the NFC stuff, actually, do you have anything else for the AFC?
No.
All right, so the NFC East.
Atlanta Falcons actually won a game. They held on. They held on with the lead.
Who'd they beat? I didn't see that one.
It was the Thursday nighter.
Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah, you're right. They played Carolina, didn't they?
I think so.
Yeah, because my man McCaffrey was supposed to be back. But, of course, he's not. And then they were like, oh, yeah, let's just go ahead and lose this game. And that's another one, too. I know they signed Bridgewater, but you have a new head coach. Who's to say that they wouldn't make a move for another known quarterback? Like, there are a lot of options at play for some of these teams with newer coaches. Atlanta, too, they're looking to get rid of Matt Ryan. You don't have a better chance to do that if you keep winning random games. But, I mean, same with the Vikings. They beat the Packers, and now you're looking at, all right, we're going to have to compete in this division. It's kind of tight. It's nowhere near the NFC East, where all their teams are garbage, and you don't know if you're going to get in or not. So, just looking at it, and my topic for this one is the Drew Brees and Tom Brady stuff. I can't take it. Like, I'm annoyed that we're probably going to be hearing about this all year. Like, look, we get it. Tom Brady and Drew Brees are back and forth for the NFL passing records. Like, they're both actively playing this year. The Bucs were on a bye. And so we get this big breaking news that Drew Brees just broke Tom Brady's passing record. Like he was Dan Marino and hasn't been playing for 20 years. And I was like, I just see it first, breaking Tom Brady. And I'm like, did he get injured? Why would you be telling me about Tom Brady in this game? And then I have to wait 5 seconds because no one's telling me what it is on the announcers. And then it comes back again. It's like Drew Brees broke his record. Like, we get it. They're both chasing passing records. They're 40 years old. They've been playing for decades. Like, we get it. I don't need to be told about this every week. And I hope the NFL stops doing it because it's just annoying. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, just think it's funny in general because with some of these records, it's like the guys are playing for so much longer. Like when Emmitt Smith broke the rushing record, it was like he hung around long enough to break it. And it looked like some of that, like the way that he was getting it. It's like you're running behind arguably some of the best offensive lines in NFL history. So like it's not really that much of a shocker. Like where comparison, I look at like what Barry ran behind, where like it was literally everyone knew he was getting it. Like, to have that kind of record and knowing that everyone's going to be ganging up on you every time, like, I think there's more to it than I just played 35 years and I just outlasted everybody.
And it's just the fact that they're both active. And I know they're in the same division. And, like, of course, Tom Brady just threw a bunch of touchdowns last week, so he got it. Then he's on a bye. Okay, he's not even playing this week. So, of course, if Drew Brees throws another touchdown or two, he's going to get it back. Like, it makes zero sense to even be talking about it. And the number one thing that I think I hate the most is they have the need to just show the graphic all the time. Like, they're not even playing each other. The Saints are playing, who are they playing? The Bears. And they're talking, and like they're showing the Drew Brees stuff. It is like, I don't care. But every time they do it, they always put like the Super Bowl wins really tiny. And I know I brought this up a couple weeks ago because I saw it before, where it's like, oh, here's the passing touchdowns. Here's the passing yards, like the most meaningless stuff. And then it will be like playoff wins and the Super Bowl wins, like even smaller. Because the gap is so big. Like Tom Brady's way ahead of Drew Brees in terms of hardware that it just doesn't matter. So like, okay, well, let's just worry about meaningless touchdowns in the middle of November 1st, like the middle of the season. So just stop. Like, we get it. You can find other things to show me. Like, show me some other stats. Try to teach me about some younger guys in the league. Because, like, no one knows some of these younger guys. Like, I just feel like the NFL has kind of stopped marketing some of their younger players. Like, they've kind of just gone all in with Patrick Mahomes. every TV ad is like Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers together. Like, he might as well just get the Olympic torch and just hand it to him. Because I feel like that's what they're doing.
Oh, you have your Super Bowl win, lifetime guarantee.
And all it takes is one. Ask Aaron Rodgers. You don't even need multiple ones. Like, I could just imagine if Tom Brady really wanted to just jump through all those hoops. I know he's been in a couple of new commercials. Like, there's that one where he's polishing his Buccaneers helmet, and like Gronk's in it. Like, I can imagine they just teamed up because they knew that fans would be annoyed by seeing them together in a commercial. That's what I think. I'm like, oh, because in the NFC, let's be honest. Right now, you have the Seahawks. They beat the 49ers, knocked them down to 500. And you really have Tampa Bay, the Saints, and Green Bay right now. I would put them on another level. And they're all going to be fighting for the bye and the home field advantage. Now, my second level is going to be the Bears and the Cardinals. Because, and you could even throw the Rams in there. I know they lost, so they're half game behind. Well, I guess they have the same record as the Bears now. But I just don't think, like, those teams, they might make the playoffs. I don't think they have enough to make a run. Possibly the Cardinals. But again, Cliff Kingsbury, he never impressed me in-game with college coaching. There were some times where he was against evenly matched teams where he should have won. And the NFL's kind of in the same boat. I know they beat the Seahawks last week. But, like, I need to see it more. Maybe Kyler Murray can hide your coaching mistakes. I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe he's cut out more for the pro game. Because some guys aren't. I mean, look at Nick Saban. Way better in college than he was in the pros. The only guy that I could think of is successful in both was Pete Carroll. And he wasn't that successful in the NFL before. He went to USC. And he ran USC like a pro team. Sanctions and all. So, maybe he figured something out. Had a lot of more room to come up with his practices and get stuff down before bringing it to the Seattle team. I mean, I don't know. But those are my teams to watch in the NFC. The NFC East, I wouldn't be surprised just because it would be the most bullshit thing for, like, the Eagles to sneak into the playoffs and then upset Tom Brady. Like, that would just be the kind of year 2020 has turned out to be. And it would just piss me off. But I don't think any of those teams are good. And I just don't see any of them getting past the first round in the playoffs.
Oh, God, no.
So, what are your thoughts on the NFC right now?
I think it's pretty wide open, but I will say it's interesting to see what they're doing with Tampa. Like, they're clearly in a go for broke mode right now with signing Antonio Brown and trying to, like, the amount of offensive firepower that they've included to their team this season has just, like, they're clearly just going, and I tip the cap to them for at least trying to go in on winning it all, because that window is going to close for them really fast.
Well, yeah, you either have Tom Brady or you don't. I mean, that's their whole strategy. It's like when the Broncos had Peyton Manning. Like, that was it. And look what happened whenever he retired. They still had the great defense, and then they couldn't do, like, anything. Was Tim Tebow before that or after that? Because, like, they had tried a couple of different things. I think he was before, wasn't he?
Or,
and then they were like, yeah, that's it. We're just going to get, because you can, like, look at it from, like, oh yeah, they had Jameis Winston, and they just, at one point, they just, like, all right, we're giving up. We got to get Tom Brady in here. And look at the Colts. They're kind of doing the same thing. They were like, let's just take a chance on Phillip Rivers. And now I'm surprised that they're not making moves. Because I thought for sure the Bengals were shopping like A.J. Green. And with Hilton being injured on and off, I was surprised that they didn't try to bring in another veteran wide receiver. I don't know, maybe the asking price was too high. But, like, the talks kind of just fell through. And so, like, I don't know if there's another move that's available to them. I just remember Green was one of the ones because he's on my fantasy team and they're floating him around as trade bait. But that's like a perfect move for what the Colts could try to do. Tampa Bay just they've been signing guys out of retirement and suspensions. Like, hey, Gronk. Like, no other team could have picked Gronk and had him come in. Zero chance. But Tom Brady can. And so Antonio Brown, they said Tom Brady said that he could reel him in. Let's see if it happens. I mean, to be fair, he did play lights out in that one Patriots game that he did play. It was the off the field stuff that did him in. So, I don't know. The Packers, I feel like teams have the book on Aaron Rodgers. And whenever they put that out, he can't do anything. Like the Vikings shut him down so bad that he got zeroed in on Devontae Adams and he was just throwing in the triple coverage. And it was like, what are you doing? I don't know if that's the plan. Like you just triple cover him and he's like, you know what, I got to throw it in there. Like, what do they know that I don't know? Why are they covering him with three guys? Like, does he have some magical gloves? I better just throw it in there, see if he catches it. Because he has enough drops as it is, but I'm like, what are they doing? I know the running back's hurt, but like the Vikings completely shut him down. I would like if you didn't tell me anything else about those two teams, I would think the Vikings had the chance to be in first in the NFC North. But that's how dominant they looked. Aaron Rodgers couldn't do anything, and that happened in their other loss too this year. So if you get him out, that's why I would say, I'm leaning towards like having them as an NFC leader, but I really can't put them there. Like I think it's Seahawks, Buccaneers, then maybe the Packers before the Saints. I know I'm saying like I know Tampa Bay, they lost to the Saints, right? But my thing is they're bringing in Antonio Brown. Like they didn't have that kind of weapon power. Tom Brady is getting more comfortable. Like I'm thinking that they're going to be clicking by the time the end of the season starts. So that's going to be my pick for it. And so I'm excited down the stretch. Those are the things I saw today. Some of the injury stuff, like Carolina, they're going to get McCaffrey back. I'm thinking that it's not going to make a difference for them because Mike Davis has been doing so great. Like, why? Or Mark Davis, what's the running back for them? One of the Davises. In case I mess that up. But I will say this, like, they're going to be big underdogs. I could see them splitting time, but it's not really going to happen. It is Mike. I was right. But other injuries like coming back, you don't know across the board for some of these teams. It's just a weird year. So you got anything else for the NFL?
Nope.
All right. Speaking of playoff stuff and the expansion and our little middle halftime break or a football talk, Major League Baseball is talking about doing a 14-team playoff. And I'm going to circle back around this when we get to the college football playoff. Major League Baseball, they had the expanded playoff this year. They've been toying with that one-game play-in. But like I said, when you're looking at overall numbers, you get multiples more viewers in terms of playoff games than you do regular season games. Like, I don't care if it's a divisional battle between, like, the Mets and the Braves down the stretch. Only regional fans are tuning in for that. Like, no AL fan is going to care. Like, Yankees, Red Sox fan, they're not going to look at that game and be like, that's must-watch TV. But if it's the playoffs, I think they do tune in because they think, we might have to play these guys. I wonder who's on their team. And so, like, I think that could be the magic bullet for baseball. And I've been saying it for a while, like, go ahead, do whatever you need to do, but you got to get people to watch the game playoff baseball is where it's at. You might as well just expand like the playoffs as much as possible, and then see what happens. You could even get weird with it, like the college baseball World Series. Like no one's telling you how to set these up. Like if they need to innovate, that's what they need to do. I've said for it all along too. Like they should try to do something with the minor league if they go like the European soccer route, where they're calling up teams, moving them around. And some of this stuff is on the table. I don't know what all is going to happen, but they do have a big collective bargaining up. And I wouldn't be surprised. There's a lot of smoke this year about a salary cap to quiet some of those rumors. Because I think like the letting everybody play, because like I think that was the big thing not a few years ago now, but like when Mark Cuban wanted in, like the owners wouldn't let him in. And it was like kind of like an old guys guard where they had, this is the standing. These are the teams that are going to spend. We don't want Mark Cuban coming in and just throwing money around and upsetting the apple cart if he bought the Pirates. So they didn't let him come in. They didn't even invite him to the table, which I think now with the internet and everything, you're going to get a lot more rumors and leaks and stuff like that. Who's going to be there? Are they going to expand? They've been moving teams around. They've been talking about it. I don't know what's going to happen, but if you're a baseball fan, keep an eye on it because it seems like they have a ton of stuff coming up in terms of what they could end up agreeing to. Playoffs, salary caps. I think those would be the two most realistic. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they cut games. I know they're built on like the history and the like record book, like, okay, this is how many home runs you can hit in a season and all the things like that. But at some point, if people aren't watching, you're going to go the way of like horse racing and boxing where you have your niche audience that only tunes in for 3 events a year. And that's it. So that was my extra thing. You have anything else for a little hot time break?
No, I thought that was pretty good because they got to do something to start being a little bit more creative to draw people in, or they're going to lose it.
And it goes back to like they're focused on the markets and stuff. And like I said, with the internet, you don't need to care about any of that anymore. Like the players aren't riding trains from city to city. Like it's not 100 years ago. So if people want to watch, they want to watch. I was hoping that the one thing I saw on there that I didn't see, blackouts. End them. I think baseball started it. I could be wrong. It was either baseball or football, at least from my knowledge. Like they started the blackouts because they wanted people in their network. And I want to say it was baseball because they put out this stupid map that like if you lived in North Carolina, it included 3 teams. Like you couldn't get the Braves games, you couldn't get the Orioles games, and you couldn't get the Nationals games. It's like, which team is supposed to be actually close? Because all of those are like a 5 hours drive away from the capital of North Carolina. So none of those teams should be blacked out at all. How are you getting any new fans for that? And then, of course, hockey's doing it and all the other sports. Like, I don't think the NFL really does blackouts. I could be wrong. They do like their more regional national game, but they're more about everybody watching. And I think that's like the main difference. Like you have these smaller sports that are all about, oh, no. We got to keep it small time. We got to keep it regional. And that's where you're losing fans. Because if your regional teams suck every year, people aren't going to watch. They aren't. So that's my last thing. We're getting into college football now. Before I get started on the other talk, because I know Matt has some stuff he wants to complain about. Hot seat. James Franklin, Jim Harbaugh. Who do you think leaves first?
I bet Harbaugh goes back to the NFL.
Because I had a feeling that they're both gone this year. The only thing that holds me back, and that's why I said leaving, because like you said, Harbaugh has an out. He can just go to the NFL. I don't know if James Franklin still has the option, but I talked about it last week. His team doesn't look like they care. And I have some notes on this because I think they're very, very similar. So college football is all about three pillars. The first, you have to be good at recruiting. Harbaugh came in, recruited well, very comparable to James Franklin. If you go back and look at their team rankings, the blue chip ratio, all the stuff we talk about in the offseason, they're very, very similar. Franklin's peak happened right after the 2016 upset of Ohio State. It actually kept him up there in the rankings, which I'll let you get to in a little bit, and in terms of recruiting for 2 seasons. Okay? Now, both teams, their recruitings have both dropped off. Penn State's has cratered. I don't know what's going on, but they're ranked in the 30th right now for this incoming recruiting class. Harbaugh's in the teens, not near the top 10 where he was for a few years. I mean, they've both significantly dropped. So that's a big warning flag for me in terms of one of the big 3 in college football. Number 2, player development. And this is another one where they're both very similar because the programs, they've kind of stopped developing players. And the one thing that's another big red flag for both programs, transfers. ESPN did an article on this a couple weeks ago. Penn State and Michigan have so many players transferring out of the programs. They're in the top 10 like in the country. And so you can sign a recruiting class, but I think they said, I had the numbers for Michigan. I think it was like the one year, Michigan lost 8 guys that they had signed in a top recruiting class. 8 of them transferred. Then they had like 6 guys leave, and then I think the other one was 7. And Penn State had a bunch of guys transfer just this past year. If you can bring them in recruiting, but you're not developing them and you're just letting them transfer out, that's a big strike on you. Like, how are you going to be successful in the long run? I mean, I'm more familiar with Michigan's roster. They have multiple guys starting at other universities. Defensive line looked awful. Guy transfers to Rutgers. Guy transfers to Tennessee, both starting, both looking really good. Defensive backs looked bad. One of their guys is the starting corner for Minnesota now. At some point, you have to keep these guys. And same with like development. They're getting guys drafted in the NFL, but I don't know in terms of like the recruiting and other guys leaving if it's enough to keep it. The program, like they're nowhere near Ohio State where they need to be. And then my last thing is actually in-game coaching, which if you watched the past 2 weeks, I would say just this past week for Michigan, because the Minnesota game was pretty solid, except for the actual preparation, which I told you on the road, he never has them ready to go. So they always have to take a shot, giving up the early touchdown and coming back. James Franklin going for it on 4th down and like immediately in your own zone. Like, what are you doing? And like running the ball up the middle repeatedly. Ridiculous. So I would say that both of them are very hot. I don't think they get fired. I don't think fans would really care at this point if either of them left. Because if you look at the decline, I don't have the numbers for Franklin, but like I said, 2016, they beat Ohio State, won the Big Ten. They've been dropping basically pretty consistently. Very Brady Hoke-like. Michigan, Harbaugh started 19-3. I don't know what years those were. This is from the Michigan site. So he had like an 8.63 winning percentage. After that, those first 2 seasons, I would assume that is, he's been 29-16 since. So complete drop off. So I'll say in college, I've said it, you only have a couple years to capitalize. You can't lose. Like Michigan, there's no way he could have lost to Michigan State because Mel Tucker comes in. Michigan State has been decimated. They just lost to Rutgers. Now, because you were overlooking them, because of whatever you're doing, you have no chance now. Because he has that over you on the recruiting trail. So, what are you going to do? I'd like to get your thoughts, Matt.
The one thing that I'll say for both of them is I know that there were a couple players that Michigan had discussed opting out. Did they have a lot of guys that were choosing not to play this season?
Well, that's where I'm looking at it, because Penn State, the big one, they had Parsons, their best defensive player.
The
Michigan,
that out. Plus, they had two of their starting running backs were out.
yeah, which we talked about last week. And I think Michigan's in the same boat. They had their starting cornerback, Thomas, he opted out. He's going to go to the NFL draft. And their best wide receiver also opt out, which would have helped out stretch the defense. They didn't really get any good shots in, because now all they're left with, Michigan only has basically slot receiver builds, because all of their bigger wide receivers opted out for the NFL, and then Tariq Black transferred to Texas. So I think it's a mix of both. I think the coronavirus really hurt them because of the processing. I don't know if Harbaugh's like pushing these guys out to transfer, but you can't have people transfer out and then look at your starting lineup and then also have them opt out, because it really puts you in a bad spot. Because and I'll play devil's advocate here, the coaches have to know. Like, you could say that they lost Ambry Thomas on defense and he was their lockdown corner. Why are you still playing man corner then? Like, if you had to have known, okay, we're in a drop off here, let's let Michigan State just throw 100 deep balls and we'll just tell our guy to just get a pass interference every time. Like, at some point you have to say, like, holy crap, all they're doing is just getting penalties on us because they're just throwing deep and our guys just tackling them. Like, that's 100% on Don Brown. I don't see how Don Brown's not fired. Because, like, for both these teams, it's such a weird year with coronavirus. I could see both of them being back next year. It just depends on what opens up. Like, James Franklin's been heavily rumored to USC for a while. If USC doesn't make the move, because, like, what if the Pac-12 never plays? What if they only play a couple games? Like, can they get rid of Clay Helton? Like, does that job open up?
I think they can do whatever they want if they throw enough money at it.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what you're looking at in terms of contracts, and they're going to have to pay for it. It's a broken contract. Maybe there's a deal there. Maybe he's looking at a different school. But, like, in terms of options, like, it really lines up bad for him. Like I had said, there's been speculation that he's been interested in Florida State even. That's impossible now. Like, James Franklin would have had to made that jump last year. I would think Florida State would have hired him. I don't know if they'd be in a better position right now. But Florida's not going to be open. Miami's probably not going to be open. They're doing pretty good. Florida State, like I said, they just hired a coach. They're not going to fire him. They're already lost so many recruiting cycles, they can't keep changing coaches. They need to stick with the guy for a few years.
Brown get walk, I will gladly welcome him with open arms.
Who?
Don Brown. I will gladly take him as my defensive coordinator, straight up.
Matt, did you watch that game?
No, I didn't watch it. What was enticing about Michigan State, Michigan?
If you watch that game, you would not want Don Brown. There were zero adjustments. Michigan State won the game because let me look it up for you, because I didn't look at it.
Because Jim Harbaugh ran that 2 tight end power set and just ran it right into the middle, and Michigan State stopped them. There's no diversity to his offense. And I don't know if it's because he's handcuffing his offensive coordinator, or if he just picks the guy that just goes, I'm just going to run it inside every time. And he goes, great, you're hired. Because I feel like I'm watching a 1992 Michigan game every time I watch them. There's nothing exciting about their offense. So, yeah, when you completely rely on your defense to bail you out of games and flip field position, you're gonna have games like that. Like, that's the Michigan brand. We play special teams, we play defense, we get the short field, and you'll score your touchdowns. I haven't seen Michigan drive the length of the field and score against anyone worth a darn in 3 years, 4 years. It's like everything happens on these either splash plays or defensive or special teams turnovers.
Well, I'm looking at the stats here for you. I can't get a good breakdown of this because they're not telling me exactly how many of them. So Michigan had 10 penalties called on them for 86 yards. I would say and this is a guess because I might be over-exaggerating, 7 or 8 of them were pass interference penalties. Michigan State, Don Brown had cornerbacks one-on-one coverage the entire game. Michigan State just kept throwing fades or all goes the entire game.
Why is it even competitive? Like, they should win those.
Matt, Michigan State had 7 turnovers against Rutgers. Why is he trying to play man up when you're not getting pressure with the blitz? All he had to do was switch to a zone. I don't think Michigan State would have scored more than 7 points. Instead, because they kept one-on-one coverage, they passed for 323 yards, 3 touchdowns, plus the penalty yards. Where's their third down? They only had 5 third down conversions regularly. Their other third down conversions were all on penalties. I don't know if they were all third downs, but they were just taking shots. And I actually thought Michigan State, they clammed up. There was 2 drives in like the third and the beginning of the fourth quarter where they went to the ball like you were talking, just running right up the middle. And I thought, had they not been watching the game? Like, what are they doing? I thought Mel Tucker is going to blow this game because I thought Michigan State should have had 40 points. Don Brown made 0 adjustments. The only thing that stopped them, and maybe that was their plan, they said, hey, let's just give him a couple wins here so he doesn't make adjustments down the stretch. And that was it. And actually, for the game break, it should have been tied. Or no, Michigan should have had – it should have been a 1-point game because Michigan had a chance to score a touchdown. Instead, they ran a wildcat and tried to do a Tim Tebow-type jump pass, Matt, that was knocked down, and they settled for a field goal from like the 5-yard line. And it was like a 1-yard. I don't remember what the exact situation, but they could have easily just, at that point, you have a big running quarterback, just run the ball. Let him do the jump pass. I don't understand it. But you're right, and I think if you watch the Minnesota game, totally different offense. It has to be Harbaugh because there's been 3 coordinators. I see people keep saying, oh, it's on the coordinator. It's not on the coordinator. You have to be nuts. It seems like Harbaugh's hands off with the defense because whatever the defensive coordinator wants to run, they run. Like, there's no way Harbaugh would have been letting the guys on one-on-one islands the entire game. And it was a totally different defense when DJ Durkin was there. DJ Durkin actually had some shutdown defense. If you look at what Don Brown's been running, can't cover crossing routes, lets his guys get into one-on-ones, and they get toasted. To the point where you actually learn the defender's name, and you feel bad for him. Like, I think Vincent Gray's name was trending because he was either getting burnt for long completions or getting a pass interference called on him. And people were just roasting him on Twitter, and it was like, the young kid should never be in that situation. That's 100% on the coach. And I feel bad for the guy. So take Don Brown. He should be gone. I'm surprised he stuck with him this long. And the offensive coordinator, Harbaugh, seems to keep changing them. And I think that's a scapegoat move. Because last week, there were no runs up the middle. I mean, there was a one that they ran for a touchdown. It was kind of like a delayed handoff. But he never just said, we're going to pound it up the middle like he did this week. It's almost like before the game, he decided, oh, we have better players than them. We're just going to pound the ball up the middle. But they did it from shotgun. And like doing it from shotgun is very similar to like what Penn State does. And if you watch the Ohio State game, you saw the same offense. Very similar concepts. And I know Gaddis worked for Franklin for a while, so maybe it's just the formation lineups. But that's 100% Harbaugh calling in those plays. So he, like I said, he either has to decide, hey, I'm actually going to be hands off. But again, it goes back to recruiting then. Are you going to be that recruiting guy? Are you going to be hands off? I don't think he can do it.
I feel like the offense has regressed. And I think that's the thing that's holding them back, is that it hurts in attracting more recruits, and it hurts the bottom line because when you're looking at what his offense is, I feel like it's even veered more it's veered further away from some of the more modern stuff that he was doing when he was at San Francisco. Like he was toying with Kaepernick when he was doing some of the zone read stuff from Pistol, and I feel like he's not really incorporating that as much. And I don't know if that's because he just doesn't feel confident in his quarterbacks to be able to do that or to execute the scheme, or if it's just he doesn't like it.
Well, that's what I'm going to say. And we'll switch topics. I know people probably don't want to hear about this the whole time, but I'll say that's the one thing that I keep hearing from like Michigan apologists, because I went and talked to some other fans after the game. And so here's my unofficial poll. 0% of Michigan fans think that they will even compete with Ohio State. I would say almost all of them, I don't know a good percentage, think that this is Harbaugh's last year. But then again, other people think that he's only going to stay next year because of the coronavirus. Like they don't think they'll let him go because it's a weird season. But it goes back to the quarterback. Everyone keeps saying, oh, he just hasn't gotten his quarterback. He's supposed to be the quarterback guy. You can't tell me Michigan State can get a better quarterback every year. But you can't. And it goes back to him pushing guys out. Like he had Brandon Peters, gets hurt. And I think maybe that's what it is. Maybe because every quarterback he's had that started out well has been hurt. Wilton Spate gets hurt. Brandon Peters gets hurt. I thought Dylan McCaffrey, after the Notre Dame game when he came in, I thought that he should have taken over the game for Shea Patterson. I don't think Shea Patterson should have ever came back, but McCaffrey gets hurt. So I wonder if he just kind of processes some of these guys and says like, okay, Spate, you got to transfer. Like, I got to get a guy that's more durable. Okay, Brandon Peters, like you got to transfer because he's starting for Illinois right now. He has coronavirus. I hope he gets well. And now Dylan McCaffrey's transferring. Like that's 100% on Harbaugh. You can't say every single quarterback you get into the program is a bust. Like your whole job is supposed to be training these guys up.
All of these guys suck.
Yeah, it's like, what was I thinking? Like I think the only quarterback that he's gotten as like a recruit and was able to get drafted was Gentry, the Steelers tight end. Because he switched to tight end. That's it. That was his first quarterback signing, I think. There might have been one other one that didn't get drafted, but like that was the guy. Now he says like Joe Milton's the future. He's going to be our big durable quarterback. He's 6'5". Like he can do all the things. Like he can run like McCaffrey, but he's at more size, so he's going to be able to take the hits. But like, why would you push McCaffrey out in a season with coronavirus? Like, you know that at any time, like look at what happened with Wisconsin. Their starting quarterback had coronavirus. They had another injury. Like if I was the head coach, I would have been doing whatever because the season doesn't count in terms of eligibility. So McCaffrey doesn't get another year just because he's transferring. Like he's kind of in no man's land right now. Like you're talking about like, you don't think other guys on the team see that? And say like, oh yeah, all these guys we've been practicing with, I mean, that's not triple digits, but that's like double digits every year of people that are transferring out of the program. Like that's on the head coach. Like, I'm sorry. And that's why I think like Franklin, people keep saying like, oh, his team's young. That's what they said about Harbaugh. Why? Because their upperclassmen are leaving. At some point, that's a mark on the head coach. Maybe he already has one foot out the door. I mean, but like, it's not like Harbaugh's not going to have a great NFL offer because there's no NFL team that has great talent that's going to look and say, you know what, he's doing a hell of a job. There's going to be none. He's going to have offers from Lions, the Jets. Like, what other bad teams are out there? Like,
he'd go to Atlanta. That would be the matchup.
Atlanta. And I'm not saying he would suck there because some of the things like I think, and that's why I think that he touched the game here too much for Michigan State and Ohio State, because it seems like if you look at his stats, which they showed like at home, he's undefeated at home, except he's almost lost every game to Michigan State and Ohio State. I think he's like 1-6 or something like that now. But he's undefeated against everybody else, even Notre Dame. But I think the difference is he just like says like, look, We're not going to do anything crazy. We're going to go really conservative. We're only going to run the ball and just not turn it over. But that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. When your defense sucks, like you're not going to be able to do it. You shouldn't be out executing Michigan State like that's just embarrassing. He's playing like he's Rutgers. And it's just like, okay, we get it. Like you had success doing that at Stanford, but you had to do it at Stanford. You weren't out recruiting everybody. Like Michigan State's roster was nowhere near. They were saying that this is as big as an upset, like in terms of like the spread. Like it was only second to App State in terms of like Michigan history. It was a 25-point line at one point, Matt.
Which brings up my biggest frustration. Why were they even ranked to begin with?
Go ahead, because this is going to tie into my next thing. Go ahead.
Well, why did it matter? Why did we need all of these Big Ten teams to be ranked when we knew going in that they stink? And in years past, I like the Big Ten model that in years past we were really good. So why do we have like teams ranked? Because I'm curious to see how far, for example, how far does Oklahoma State fall after losing to unranked Texas? That Texas has been hot garbage for how long?
Well, I have it up right now. Oklahoma State's 14th right now.
Okay.
You know who they're behind?
Who are they behind?
Indiana, baby.
Well, they got that bump because they had that power win against Penn State. Why did Penn State need to even be remotely close? Like, to me, if you're a top 10 team, why are you going to overtime against unranked Indiana to begin with? And then to lose to them, you see at the table. Well, why should Michigan be ranked when you lose to Michigan State?
Well, I'll say this. Michigan with Harbaugh I think they've gone to overtime with Indiana, except they've won.
They did last year.
That's the difference. They always play Indiana tight.
Have a big bar into this where it's like, oh, breath of fresh air when we survived Indiana. And that's not to knock Indiana, but let's not try to put like 17 teams from the Big Ten in just because they decided to play 2 months later than everybody else. Like that's the whole issue that I have with this is we got to make sure we get our Big Ten. Well, then put Ohio State. Like that's the only team that's been worth a fart the last couple of years from the Big Ten. If you want to put them in the top 10, that's fine. I'm not going to argue that point. But don't put half of the teams in there to just throw them up there as paper champions because you want to guarantee one of them a seat in the championship. I think that's smacking all of these other teams in the face, especially when you look at a school like Liberty, who's undefeated, and they're just now cracking the top 25 and has been playing games since the start. When you look at a school like BYU that under normal circumstances never gets a chance at the table, like why not? This would be the year to try to let some of these non-power fives, even throw a Cincinnati out there that playing a regular typical season, no one's even going to bat an eye to them. Why not give them that opportunity? Because the rest of the Big Ten hasn't showed. I mean, with 2 weeks in, we don't know if their conference is garbage or not. Well, we can on history.
Well, see, this is my big thing, and this is why I think college playoff expansion has been heating back up. So if you look at this, Penn State, I brought them up earlier, 2016, when they beat Ohio State. This is the first time they've fallen out of the rankings, I think, since. Because I saw a stat where they had the fourth longest streak behind like Alabama, Ohio State, maybe Clemson. I can't remember the fourth team. But like they've been winning at such a consistent level since that game with James Franklin. Now you're starting to see it tank. So like I understand Penn State being ranked so high because they really didn't know. The other big ones were like Michigan. I thought they should have fell out of the rankings. They're ranked 23rd right now, right around teams that I don't know if should be ranked either, Auburn and Texas.
But that's such bullshit. Why should they be in the top 25? There's no reason.
Well, see, that's where I think it comes with, like you're saying, they don't beat anybody. But if you watch the Notre Dame game, at least 3 times during that game, Notre Dame has the longest undefeated streak, I think, in the country. Their last loss was the 40-something, like 10 loss at Michigan last year. So I think when teams look at that, they say, oh, Michigan, that was a rivalry game. Let's just throw that under the bus. They don't think, like, I don't know if a lot of pollsters really know that, like, D'Antonio blew that program up on the way out the door. And I think a lot of, like, the people that vote, they don't care enough. And they just think, like, oh, Harbaugh's 3-3 against Michigan State now. Of course he's going to lose, like, every other one or something. So we'll keep them ranked for now. Now they have to play. Michigan goes to Indiana, I believe, this weekend. So now you're also setting up a TV matchup that's going to drop one of them from the rankings. Well, maybe not. If Michigan somehow wins that game, which I don't think they will, I'm thinking Michigan loses on the road.
Indiana will just go from like 18 to 22.
The one thing, though, Matt, is Indiana's quarterback isn't that accurate. So as long as Michigan's not getting any penalties, they might have a chance. That's the one thing. Because Michigan State's quarterback was pretty accurate. That's what I understand how can Jim Harbaugh not have an accurate quarterback in 4 years? It's like, what are you doing? So we'll see what happens. But they also have to play Wisconsin the following week. But here's one for you. There's rumors that the coronavirus has spread through Wisconsin. They might be out for another 3 weeks. Because the way the Big Ten's sitting, I think if it's over 5 or 10% or something like that of your team has coronavirus, you have to start the 3-week count over. So you could be looking at the Michigan game canceled. And I'm not saying that would be a big win for Wisconsin anyway. So I would think that this week's canceled already. Purdue. It's still on the list right now. But I don't know when they make that announcement because, like I said, we're recording this Sunday. So we'll probably know by the time you listen to this on Tuesday or Wednesday, you'll know if it's canceled. But Wisconsin's supposed to play Purdue, Michigan. That third game is Northwestern. Northwestern's one of the 3 undefeated teams in the West. So, like, what do you do at the end of the year if Wisconsin only plays 3 or 4 games and they're 3-0 against like a Northwestern that might be 7-1? Or I guess they'd have that Wisconsin game canceled. So let's say 6-1. Do you put Northwestern in the Big Ten championship? Because I don't think there's any other conference. I mean, like ACC, since they started so early, Virginia Tech's been canceling, but they've been catching up. And in terms of the standings, because I have it up, they're a non-factor. Like they're 4-2 right now, and they're behind like 3 or 4 other teams. It could come into play if teams beat each other up, but like I don't think Virginia Tech is going to be in a position to be like a ACC leader or be in that game if they don't end up playing all of their games, because they still have to play Clemson, Miami, and of course their big game against Liberty this week. So,
and and I'll say this, as far as like Nebraska canceling game or Wisconsin canceling games, I give another tip of the cap to Nebraska, because they've been the team that's been like dragging the Big Ten along with like trying to get them to start playing. And then they said, hey, we don't have a game. Can we look outside to try to schedule something so that we can play? And Big Ten's like, nah, you just sit at home and hang out. You think about what you're doing.
Which that's a big business move. And I think it just makes Nebraska look bad, which is what ESPN was calling them out for too. Because at some point, why wouldn't you ask the Big Ten first? But I think the agreement that they signed, that I thought it was leaked out, like they had already agreed to not play any other games this year. Like they all came in and they all said it's Big Ten or nothing, because we don't want to risk having another team get the virus for any other reason, which I understand, because Wisconsin's going to miss how many other games. Nebraska, for as bad as they are, they're still a big TV draw. Like let's say if Penn State and Michigan are both doing awful, like let's say they both lose like the next 3 or 4 games, people are still going to watch on TV. Those are like the bigger teams in the conference. It doesn't matter if they're 1-7 this year. Like people are still going to watch. Nebraska's still doing that on the West. There's not really another team out there. With Wisconsin's not drawing. Iowa gets some eyeballs, but it's not on the level of Nebraska. Like let's be honest. So that's what I'm looking at. And I mean, if you go across, and this goes with like the expansion stuff, like you're saying, I'm 100% all for it, like including the other conferences. And if you remember, at the beginning of the year, there was an 8-team vote. They thought maybe we should expand the playoffs to eight teams, and it got shot down. And now it's heating up that they think that got shot down because there was push from the smaller conference to just go to 16 teams. And it makes sense. And I think they really missed a chance to just do that this year because there are 10 conferences. You could really fill it out by automatically adding in the teams you mentioned. Cincinnati. I know BYU's not in a conference, but add them in. Coastal Carolina. Then you're still able to put in the Big 12 and possibly the Big 10, or maybe you could throw Penn State in there. Maybe they turn it around. Maybe Auburn ends up 8-2 or whatever how many games they're going to play, or Texas. You're losing them. They're cut off now.
It's because they'll probably be ranked in the top 10 by the time they playoff time. They'll have 4 losses and somehow be in the discussion of should you add Auburn.
Well, the big thing is going to be this year because they didn't expand. In Cincinnati, if they go undefeated, I don't think there's any way you leave them out because who can jump them? Like BYU maybe, but that's in the same boat where the college football playoffs are going to look at it. And there's so much money and contracts and lawsuits that could be thrown out there because it's going to happen. It happens almost every time. That if Cincinnati, if they're up there, and I mean, look at what happened with UCF. They didn't get invited. They put them in a bowl game. They won it. Now they claim a national championship and fans are laughing at them. If Cincinnati is undefeated, Georgia already has a loss. They're going to have to play Alabama again. That's another loss for them. They're out. Notre Dame has to play Clemson, and they have to play each other twice. People keep saying, what if Notre Dame beats Clemson? Are they out of the playoffs? No, you idiots. They have to play each other for the ACC championship again. So you could have a one-loss team in Notre Dame playing a one-loss team in Clemson at the end of the year in the playoffs again at 1-4 if they stand right where they are. Because that's where it's going to be. The only drop is, does that loss put them below Cincinnati? And that's assuming Alabama and Ohio State win out. Because those are the other two teams. It's going to, and if you're looking at it, you're going to say, oh, we have a one-loss Clemson, a one-loss Notre Dame, or an undefeated Cincinnati. Which team do you drop? It's 100% Cincinnati. That's not a debate. And at some point, are you going to start to lose the casual fans? Because I think that's where it's at. Expanding it, there's no negatives to it for me. People want more football. They want it to be fair. College football, they get a lot of viewers in terms of these smaller teams. At some point, fans are going to stop caring just like the NBA. And then you're going to hope that fans tune in to watch NBA or watch Alabama, just like the NBA fans hope that people tune in to watch the Lakers. And this year, when they don't, then they're like, we don't know what happened. Where college football, you have 100 and something different teams that could have fans that could tune in. But right now, you're really telling all of them, hey, just like Matt said, you shouldn't even be ranked. There's no reason. You don't win enough. Only the big boys out there should be getting any fans, any chance at the playoffs. That's it. And so that's my thing. I think this is going to come back around. It's already been making its round in a couple newspapers. And those are the guys that vote. As old school as college football is, these polls, like I said, I don't get a vote. They're newspapers. So when the newspapers start saying hey, I'm in Cincinnati here. This is a big city. Why aren't we getting any respect? And then there's no answer. Like you said, BYU, Liberty. BYU has a chance right now, and I've said this before, where they could really be undefeated at the end of the year. They played Boise, a ranked team this week, and then they played 2 unranked teams. I'm not saying that they beat Boise. It's the 6th. I think is that a Friday game? Or is that the Thursday game? I don't know. But keep that out on your radar because that could be a playing game for the playoffs. They're independent, so there's no conference championship for them. But they could be in a couple weeks 10-0 And that there's like a couple week break before they play San Diego State. But at what point do you start jumping them with one-loss teams? I mean, that's what's going to happen. And then what are you going to have if you have 4 like undefeated teams? Do you just put them together like Cincinnati and BYU? You guys play each other, and then we'll give you like a consolation trophy. Because like I said, it's all about business. That's another reason why I think Harbaugh and James Franklin are going to be out, because if you, I try to look at there was a poll on Twitter and I think on one of the Michigan boards where people were asking if you're going to renew your season tickets. Almost no one said yes. And that's what happened with Brady Hoke, and they had to give tickets away with the Coke. If no one wants to renew their season tickets, I don't care how much you're paying Harbaugh or how much you think he's doing good for the team. If people don't care, you're gone. So that's my ending thought. And I'm worried that with this season in college football could have been the saving grace. If you would have extended it to 8 teams this year, I think 8 teams would have stuck. And I think that would have been a negative long term if conferences are really pushing for the 16-team playoff with automatic bids, which I think should happen. Because if you can't make the top 6 team, you shouldn't be there. But a team like Indiana, like you're saying, there's zero chance for them to beat Ohio State. I mean, maybe there's a slight chance, if I'm not exaggerating. But why would an Indiana team that ends up, how many games they play this year with that extra one? Let's say they end up 8-1 with their only loss to Ohio State. Without an expanded playoff, they'd never make the playoffs. Like that's the ceiling for their program. Is what? A Citrus Bowl? An Orange Bowl? The Pac-12 already canceled half their bowls. Did you see that? Their sponsorships, so a lot of bowl games got canceled this year, including like the one in Detroit. I don't know what the other ones are, but half the Pac-12 automatic bid bowls were canceled. So their conference already is hurting for TV money. Now they're not going to get their bowl money. They have to hope that another bowl game invites them. And they're already playing late. Yikes, with only Oregon ranked, I think, right now. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, USC is still ranked at 0-0. Ahead of Liberty, too. They're 20th, man. Never played a game yet. So that's it. Like, what team is going to invite random Colorado or Washington State? Like, no bowl is going to do that. So they're going to be hurting even more for money. That's my thing. You have anything for the final bell? You have anything else on college football, though?
Big matchup next week. We got Pitt, Florida State. Battle of the teams climbing out of the cellar in the ACC.
Hey, I forgot to bring it up. The only team that has the worst transfer rate than Michigan is Florida State.
We're cleaning house.
I think ours was 62%. I don't know if the math was up to date because I don't know if it counted people that opted out. But they said Florida State was the only team that's worse. I thought, oh, that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. They're showing people the door.
But what they don't know, Matt, is in basketball, Michigan number 1, Florida State number 2 in basketball recruiting for next year.
Hoop schools.
I told you could be good at both. I didn't mean Michigan. I meant Ohio State. Ohio State's like 8th, I think, or something like that. I just couldn't drop you the whole image. But there are some schools that can get it done. Not Michigan, though. Not until that next coach. But that's the one thing everyone kept saying, oh, who's Michigan going to get if Harbaugh leaves? They said the same thing with John Beilein. Oh, Michigan's never going to recruit better. If Beilein leaves, he's a known winner. Number 1 recruiting class right now. Beilein didn't even have a top 10, I don't think. Maybe the one year. Maybe the first national championship year. I think he had a great class. But I don't remember. So that's my last thing. You can't be afraid of the unknown. Same with college football. If you want to keep the history and tell me how good Army and Navy is, or how they used to be in like the 1940s, expand the playoffs so I can see them in the playoffs. Like Army's ranked 6-1 right now in the coaches poll. They have no path to the playoffs. I know they lost to BYU this year, but like let's say if that game was flipped and they were in BYU's spot, ranked number 9, they're never going to get into playoffs. If you expand it, then you have a chance of Army getting in. You might draw some casual fans in, and you would increase the sport. If you keep closing it off, people don't care. You're not going to get new people. for Clemson, Alabama 9. You're just not. So I know I kept ending the show like 13 times, but Steelers won. Like I said, pre-recorded. If there's anything you want us to talk about, let us know. If you're worried about John Gruden finishing 500 in his coaching career, also let us know. We're keeping track of that. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.